Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another week of exciting shows here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. My name, as always, is Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in. We should have a very interesting show for you guys today, as it's chock full of fantasy football talk, but we do have a very fun special segment coming up at the end of the show for all you baseball fans out there. Very rarely do I talk about baseball on this show, but when I do, it is a very special occasion. Of course, we are going to commemorate the All-Star festivities. Tonight is the Home Run Derby, and that will be the special segment. But we have a lot of interesting fantasy football segments, kind of looking at breakout stars, any burning fantasy questions you might have, and 5 very intriguing teams who could contribute to your fantasy rushing success. We also have a player profile on the defensive side of the football as well. But before we get into any of that, I do want to remind you guys, as always, to consider liking, following, and subscribing to both my show and the network as a whole. It is greatly appreciated. We also receive a ton of tips and donations, so if you do feel so inclined, please consider leaving them at the link gsmc.cloud. Right there, you will leave your tips and donations, and anything you do leave is greatly appreciated. Also, if you have any burning questions, comments, or concerns about any of my prior segments or even segments from today's show, you can leave them there and they will be answered and addressed at the beginning of the next episode. But without further ado, let's jump right into this fantasy football rich show. And let's start off with a very interesting segment. I was reading an article that really piqued my interest because it talked about breakout players in the style of last year's breakout players. So the next so-and-so, the next big thing for this season. So without further ado, I just want to jump right into it because I found it to be very intriguing. Now, it's going to be a very condensed fantasy football season. What I mean by that is it's going to be jam-packed of very tough decisions in very interesting player markets. Obviously, we've talked a lot about, and we will continue to talk about on this show, the expanding markets for each and every skill position and how much weight you should place on certain positions and when you should wait. Those will be answered in the next episode. But I'm going to be focusing now on players who certainly fit the mold of some of the stars who have risen to the occasion previously in fantasy football. And so I just wanted to highlight them. I thought this article from ESPN was very well written. It detailed how you can't really find many breakout players in the mold of someone else, but it's a fun, interesting examination. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. And let's start off with a player and a position group that's going to be very interesting to watch. We continue talking about this specific position and the different paths it's going on. And let's look at who they believe is the next Sam Laporta. Now, Sam Laporta, obviously, fantastic season last year. And it was a tight end one, obviously. It was not the best tight end one season for a fantasy player since 2017 or something like that. But it definitely cements his reputation as a young tight end who's up and coming and is just on the precipice of being one of the new faces of the tight end position. We see guys like Travis Kelce, George Kittle still doing their thing, but Sam Laporta is ready to enter that discussion. And now we are going to be looking for the next Sam Laporta to quote-unquote replace him. And that guy, and I completely agree with this selection, Brock Bowers. Now, he's not on a team with a stable QB position, and that could hinder him very greatly, but he still has terrific speed, unlike any we've seen before, combined with his strength. His hands are brilliant, and also his yards after catch ability up the middle of the field is something to behold. He's caught at least 56 passes in all 3 seasons, 26 touchdowns in 40 games in his 3 seasons at the University of Georgia, and it's really something to contemplate when we look at the tight end position. Do you want a younger guy who definitely has more upside but is still improving, or do you want an older guy who has done it so well in the league but might be regressing a little bit, like we saw with Kelce last year? He's still an excellent player, and he's definitely going to be on the conversation to be one of the first tight ends taken, but it's still something to consider in fantasy drafts. when you're looking at a younger crop of tight ends. But let's move from the tight end position for now because we'll definitely be talking about it a lot more later. Let's go to the quarterback position and see who they believe the next C.J. Stroud is. C.J. Stroud, perhaps the best rookie season by a quarterback in NFL history. Not since, say, Andrew Luck have we seen a guy put up gaudy numbers much like C.J. Stroud did. One of the best passing yard seasons in NFL history by a rookie. One of the best passing performances in a single game by a rookie. And so C.J. Stroud certainly deserves that respect. But as we know, this 2024 NFL draft class at the QB position is stacked. And it all starts off with Caleb Williams. Now, Caleb Williams, as a passer, is going to be in a very, very special thing because he has the weapons at his disposal. He has Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze. That's a fantastic three-headed monster at the wide receiver positions for the Chicago Bears. But what I love about Caleb Williams is he adds value with his legs. He kind of reminds me, his running style kind of reminds me specifically of a Russell Wilson where he wants to run to throw, but when he has no choice, he takes off. And that is what is very special and can add value at the QB position for Caleb Williams because a lot of people love that Caleb Williams plays out of structure and knows when he can play out of structure, and so that adds value to his fantasy stock. So throughout his college career, we've seen that he has put up gaudy numbers as a rushing quarterback. 1,586 rush yards, 22 touchdowns in college. Only one of three first-round QBs, though, have had 4,000 passing yards and 25 touchdowns. Only two have had 25 touchdowns. C.J. Stroud is one of them. Let's see if Caleb Williams can be added to that total. But let's now go to one of the weirder position groups to break down in terms of last year's younger crop of wide receivers, mainly because of one specific player who I've talked about before on the show, and that is Puka Nacua. In all reality, it will be very, very hard to find someone who fits the exact same profile of a guy like Puka Nacua, because Puka Nacua was a fifth-round pick out of BYU and was kind of thrust into the spotlight due to the absence of Cooper Kupp and immediately became Matthew Stafford's number one guy. And it's very rare that a lower-round wide receiver steps into the limelight immediately in their rookie season. But if there's anyone who kind of fits that profile, I really, really like Troy Franklin. I think that he really was undervalued in terms of how he was drafted. I really think that since it was a very top-heavy wide receiver class, all the second-tier wide receivers kind of fell by the wayside. People weren't talking about them as much as you would when it's such a deep class. And Troy Franklin out of Oregon really has the chance to step up. He's going to the Denver Broncos, who, outside of Cortland Sutton, don't really have that solid depth at the wide receiver position. They only have guys like Marvin Mims, Tim Patrick, who can do things in flashes and spurts of brilliance, but not put it all together to form a coherent group. And especially now that Bo Nix is going to be the quarterback, it's going to be highly integral for the Denver Broncos to cement at least two solid wide receivers that Bo Nix can rely on. And hey, Troy Franklin and him were teammates, so that connection remains. And it shows in college how much Bo Nix really trusted him, as he had 45% of the air yard share in college. And it was the tops in the class. He had 1,383 yards and 14 touchdowns last season. So that connection is going to be really vital as the Denver Broncos continue to retool and craft something around Bo Nix. And then, last but not least, let's go to the running back market. We've talked about the running back market a lot in terms of fantasy. And much like the QB and tight end position, it is going to revolutionize. Right now, it's at a weird place where you can take some of the top end guys, like a McCaffrey, and not have to worry as much, but it's going to become much more volatile. There are guys like Kyron Williams who are on the up and up. There are going to be guys this year who I really like, and this guy especially could have a huge role in a Tennessee Titans offense that is really looking for stability surrounding Will Levis, and it all starts in the backfield, and it starts with Tyjae Spears. He really turned heads at the end of last year, Tyjae Spears, and while they did sign Pollard, the Tennessee Titans did, to kind of shore up that backfield, make it more reliable and dependent for Will Levis as he transitions to his first full season as a starting QB in the NFL, Tyjae Spears certainly is going to add a lot of value for running backs in the future because people, in terms of fantasy drafts, look for depth at positions. Now the tight ends have it, the QBs definitely have it, and the running backs never really have had it, but it's starting to become a position you're going to have to pay attention to. You're going to have to be wary of as more young players come through the ranks. And Tyjae Spears, I feel like, will start that revolution because he's on a team who certainly looks like it's in a transitional period but has pieces that could really help become a contender in the next couple of years. And so, while it's definitely going to look different now that Tony Pollard is in that backfield, I really think that Tyjae Spears is going to start the conversation about how all these young running backs will get their chances to shine in this league and in their respective systems. Because right now, looking at this list, I really like all these players to break out because they're in position groups. They're going to be highly coveted. People are going to take them pretty highly. And so I'm really intrigued to see how this article pans out and how people are going to value these young talents coming out of college. But that will just about do it for this first segment of today's show. Coming next, we answer all the burning fantasy football questions you might have about current position groups, about what to do come fantasy draft time, and most importantly, how to win. You definitely don't want to miss it. We'll be right back on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast to talk more about that.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Hope you guys enjoyed that first segment. I enjoyed really breaking down who could be the next big thing at respective positions. And we definitely have another exciting fantasy football segment for you guys as I answer some burning fantasy football questions. But before we get into that, I do want to remind you yet again that if you do feel so inclined to consider leaving a tip or donation at the link gsmc.cloud, it is hugely appreciated by all at the network, especially me and my fellow podcasters. Also, if you have any burning questions, comments, or concerns, you can leave them there as well, and they will be answered and addressed at the beginning of the next episode. But without further ado, let's jump right into the second segment of today's show, and it is some of the burning fantasy football questions some of you might have. Are you a little bit anxious going into this fantasy draft? And the answer to that question could be yes, because, like I said before, it is such a volatile market right now. where you might be considering overvaluing certain position groups, even certain teams you might be considering overvaluing just due to their depth, their experience, no matter what. And I'm willing to present to you new cases to some of these questions because I want to dispel some notions that you guys might have that could prevent you from taking huge risks that might not help you down the road in terms of fantasy. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. And let's start off with a very important question because, like I said before in the previous segment, this market, while right now is not the most pivotal, it certainly will be a couple years down the road. And you definitely want to start considering this question in the back of your mind over the next couple of years to really help you understand this market. And that is which backfields, which teams' backfield specifically, should you be looking at. And right now, there are a lot of high-end running backs right now. You look at the McCaffreys of the world. You look at the Saquons who just made a big money move of the world. And you say, those are the guys who I'm going to have at the top end of my board. But I'm willing to say that there's going to be more value. I'm looking at teams that are currently slept on, like the Steelers. A lot of people say that their depth really is kind of iffy because Najee Harris has kind of had a down year, and Jaylen Warren, he had spurts of brilliance but hasn't really sustained it thus far. But I'm really looking out for that team. And then the Falcons, obviously, with Arthur Smith gone, how will Bijan Robinson be more implemented into this offense? Will Tyler Algier get more of that bell cow role, kind of that guy who gets you that 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of feel to it? And then a team like the Denver Broncos, I feel like Javonte Williams is highly undervalued in terms of fantasy. And don't sleep on Jaleel McLaughlin either. He's a very explosive guy in the open field. Should get a lot of yards after carry. And I'm really looking forward to how some of these teams, specifically when you're looking at their skill position groups, should be evaluated. I think it's very helpful to maybe go through some teams that have some underrated players, undervalued players, and get a list of about 4 or 5 guys, especially in markets that you know will immediately have like these short bursts of runs in different draft rounds, and make a kind of a safe list of guys that you can look at and be like, okay, this guy can definitely be here, but another guy from this team could also be there as well. So you want to have options. So don't throw all your eggs into one basket. Don't go down swinging, missing on a big guy like a McCaffrey or Barkley, because you're definitely going to find value later in rounds, especially at the running back market. For now, I'm warning you, the running back market is going to get very hectic in years to come. But when I look at these young running back rooms, I definitely see different ways you can take advantage of what each has to offer. Now, another position group and another kind of question that a lot of people will ask, especially because of how deep these draft classes have been getting, is which rookie wide receivers to value. Especially in a draft class that, while definitely not the best in terms of like top-end talent, let's say, it certainly is a very deep class. And I feel like a lot of players will highly covet guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, maybe even a guy like Brian Thomas, as they're going into like these very weird groups where they'll be highly seen as at least the number 1 or 2 wide receivers on that team. They immediately shore up areas of concern for their respective teams. But looking at the latter stages of the first round and the early stages of the second round in terms of the draft, there are some second-tier guys here who really are intriguing. For example, I really think a lot of people are sleeping on a guy like Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey goes immediately into an LA Chargers room that does not have a designated number 1 wide receiver just yet. They lost a lot of depth. They lost Keenan Allen. They don't really have a guy that pops in immediately. Josh Palmer, maybe. Jalen Guyton, I think he's gone. So now Ladd McConkey comes in, and while he's certainly not a guy who is going to extend the field vertically and might not be as polished of a route runner as other players in this draft, I do believe that he immediately makes things a little bit easier for Justin Herbert, because I feel like Jim Harbaugh wants to simplify that offense, get Justin Herbert to throw the ball more quickly, and Ladd McConkey is that kind of player. He has good hands, he has decent speed, and he can make things happen. And then I look at a guy like Keon Coleman, who's in a similar situation where he also has an excellent quarterback, but they have questions at the wide receiver position. They don't have a cemented number one. They have a mixture of role players like Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel outside of Keon Coleman. And I love Keon Coleman because his catch radius is brilliant. Josh Allen, his big thing is that he wants to limit turnovers, and I think Keon Coleman does a great job of that, because Josh Allen can just put it up knowing that Keon Coleman's catch radius has a great chance to allow him to make a lot of contested catches, and that's what I believe the Buffalo Bills offense is going to be predicated on. Yes, they want to simplify it a little bit. We saw it last year when they used more screen game, but I really think that Keon Coleman should not be underestimated in terms of his prowess as a receiver, especially in the department of hands and catches if you are in a PPR league as well. And lastly, I look at Xavier Worthy. Huge fan of him, huge University of Texas fan, so I watched a lot of what he did for that team. Just adds speed and verticality to a Kansas City Chiefs offense who has Patrick Mahomes, who knows what it's like to have a guy like that. He had him in Tyreek Hill for many years. Now Xavier Worthy comes in potentially as a solid replacement for this squad, and immediately varies this offense, allows Andy Reid to get more creative in terms of play calling in the open field, doesn't limit them as much, and so Xavier Worthy, I feel like, should be going, say, at least late second round, early third round in terms of fantasy drafts, because he could be a star for the Kansas City Chiefs. But then let's transition from the other quote-unquote receivers, like they did in the receiver when they included George Kittle at the tight end position. Let's talk about the tight ends. You're probably sick to death of me talking about tight ends, but it's the group right now that a lot of people are focusing on because of the fact it's just getting deeper and deeper. You're not just looking at Kelsey, George Kittle, Andrews, and those guys on this Mount Rushmore of tight ends. You're looking at guys like Laporta, McBride, these young guys who really are on the precipice of creating this narrative around these young tight ends that cement the reputation as guys who can truly take over, because you need depth when you are in fantasy drafts. You don't want to be going, oh, woe is me if you miss out on top level talents. You want a guy who you know is going to be like, okay, I'm going to get there. So, that being said, the question still remains, which path do you take? Laporta or Kelsey? Which generation do you trust more? And right now, I'm actually going to tell you, I'm going to stick with Kelsey. I'm going to stick with the Kelsey generation. Because A, they're still in the league. B, they make deep runs. And C, they have quarterbacks who can get them the football and are in systems that predicate themselves on tight ends being just as active as wide receivers. You look at Travis Kelsey and Patrick Mahomes. Last season, yes, his production was down, but he still was one of the go-to target for the Kansas City Chiefs. You look at Lamar Jackson. Yes, he's getting better wide receivers, but Mark Andrews remains his top target until he gets injured. A lot of injury concerns around him, but that was in the playoffs, and he's a fantastic regular season tight end. Then you look at a guy like George Kittle. We've seen a lot of it. If you've seen receiver, he gets a lot of attention from the San Francisco 49ers offense as well. When I look at the tight end position right now, do I really believe that Sam Laporta is going to sustain tight end 1 status, especially when it was not one of the best tight end 1 seasons by a fantasy tight end? No. I think that there are going to be better options down the line. And Sam Laporta is in an offense that really is starting to come into its own. And I don't necessarily think he's going to be the focal point for much longer. Yes, he's still important, but you have guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown on that offense. You have Jahmyr Gibbs. You have a solid backfield depth. And so Sam Laporta, I feel like, might regress a little bit. And so that's why I'm sticking with Kelce, at least for 1 or 2 more years. And then the last question, I'll be very brief here. Don't jump for a QB. Especially now that there's a huge crop of good, solid rookie quarterback, the Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, maybe Drake May. Don't jump for one. When to make your move, make it in the 5th or 6th round. You don't need me to tell you that because obviously you wait for your QBs. But you can wait a little bit longer, I feel like, this year. Because you don't have to panic. You know who's going to go early. And you know that there's depth of the position either way. So don't panic at the QB position. It's a volatile market. It's going to change. But as of now, you can still wait a little bit to pounce on your QB of choice. But that should just about do it for this segment. Coming next, we go to the fantasy rushing conundrum. Which 5 teams should be looking at in terms of who can contribute to your fantasy team's rushing production success? You don't want to miss this segment. We'll be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free.
Hello everyone and welcome back yet again to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I hope you liked these past 2 segments dissecting some fantasy football questions, comments, and concerns. But right now, we are going to be looking specifically at certain teams who can contribute to your fantasy rushing success. Now, like I said, and we'll continue to pound into your brains, running backs right now are a very interesting market because we've seen the QB and tight end markets surge ahead of them in terms of the value and depth that they have. But running backs are still a very deep position. You just have to be willing to look further into some certain teams who add that value for you. And these 5 teams that I'm looking at right now certainly have that versatility. So without further ado, let's jump right into them. Starting off with a team that I mentioned in the prior segment, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now you're thinking, Chris, why are the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team who hasn't had offensive success, especially at the running back position as they try to figure out who to utilize more, seen as a team that can contribute to my fantasy success? Well, here's why. And this is a common thread of all of these teams. They have an outstanding O-line. 71.3% run block win rate. That's very important in terms of deciding which team to focus on in terms of running backs, because you want a team that has a solid O-line that can run block very well. And the Steelers are no different. And then when we look at the 2 running backs, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, you might say, well, it's very imbalanced, but I'm here to tell you that maybe not as imbalanced as you think. Najee Harris, he had at least 1 rushing score in each of his final 3 games. Yes, it's a small sample, but it could show that for next season he's going to come running out the gate. And he had 2 with 24 or more fantasy points. And then Jaylen Warren, I really like as a receiver, especially if you're a PPR player. You caught at least 61 passes last year. And behind this O-line that's really deep and perhaps the best part of this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, that's really very helpful. Now, you can say that Arthur Smith coming in as the new OC might be a little bit sketchy because he did not utilize Bijan Robinson to the best of their abilities, but he has room to learn from his mistakes. And furthermore, they added O-line depth with Zach Frazier and Troy Fautanu. And so I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers as a team that has the opportunity to really build on their running game. They have uncertainty at the QB position. I think that Russell Wilson will be the starter come week 1, but there's still a lot of question marks about how he'll continue to play. And I'm really looking at, this team as a team that's really underperformed. I'm really looking to see them exceed expectations a little bit. I'm not as high on the Steelers as I would like to be, but that could change because of these two running backs and because of their O-line. If they lean into those two strengths, they might be golden, and you might be looking at a fantasy football season where by drafting either Jaylen Warren or Najee Harris, you could have a lot of success there. Now let's switch to a backfield that seems a little bit more certain to me and has been overshadowed due to the receiving group and their exciting young rookie quarterback, and that is the Chicago Bears. DeAndre Swift had a fantastic season as an Eagle last year after moving from the Lions. Now moves to the Chicago Bears. I really think he's going to be very relied upon in the run game right off the bat if Caleb Williams does not settle as the Chicago Bears expect him to. And they also have a fantastic O-line as well. 74.6% run block win rate. And what I love about the Chicago Bears is because of their depth and experience at certain positions that opens up what they can do on offense as well. I see that DeAndre Swift is a fantastic rusher, and I appreciate that part of his game, but I really think this opens up a lot more in terms of the screen game for the Chicago Bears, because if, say, Caleb Williams has a rocky start and the Bears just need a little bit of consistency from him, a little bit of rhythm, a little bit of tempo, screen action games, 11, 12 set personnels will help Caleb Williams in the long run. I think that in that setup, he is really going to benefit just from the depth and experience at the running back position. I think that Swift out of Roshan Johnson and Khalil Herbert definitely has the most value because he adds both traits that those two guys really experiment with well. And I think that by combining all three of them, you have one of the more talented running back rooms in fantasy, not just real life, but in fantasy as well. Most importantly, DeAndre Swift had 2 games with 21 or more points in the last 5 games, and it's going to continue. I really, really like what the Chicago Bears are building here, and I really hope that this running back room is an integral part of their growth as a team. But the next team that might surprise you a little bit is the Dallas Cowboys. They lose Tony Pollard, who, after a breakout year about 2 years ago, kind of regressed to the mean. They signed Zeke Elliott. But I really, really think that if they allow Zeke the freedom to get those crucial yards, the Dallas Cowboys as a rushing team will be very successful. Because the thing about Dak Prescott is he stagnates at the latter ends of the year because a lot of pressure is put on him. He needs kind of that burden lifter. The guy who can just grind it out through that little period. And they have one of the best O-lines in the league. 72.4% run block win rate. And I think that Zeke Elliott is really undervalued. A, as both a bell cow running back and B, as a receiving running back. He had 2 seasons with 51 receptions. He had 51 receptions actually in 2023. And I really think that Zeke Elliott just breaks open the playbook a little bit for the Cowboys. I think that Mike McCarthy, he isn't necessarily seen as a running football coach, even though he is kind of conservative in his approach. And last year especially, he really let Dak Prescott shine, and then they stagnated a little bit. But adding someone like Zeke Elliott, no matter how rough of a career he's had to date, really adds value to getting back to that momentum lifter. And Mike McCarthy is someone who can run the football. He did run the football the 14th most times in the NFL last year. So while it's not at the higher end of what you want, it really does allow you to focus on all aspects of your offense. And it's not just Dak Prescott throwing the football X amount of times and tiring himself out come playoff time. And so that value really is beneficial to what the Cowboys might want to build. And then let's go to another team who, after switching to a more running-oriented screen action game kind of style of play, really led to their benefit, led to their QB's benefit, and that's the Buffalo Bills. James Cook really is someone who came on at the end of the year and is going to be a very appealing fantasy option in later rounds should he still remain on draft boards. He had 1,122 yards last year, 33 yards of 100 or more, and the Buffalo Bills offensive line really solidified around that cause as well. 71.8% run block win rate. And here's an important stat to know. After they fired Ken Dorsey and brought in Joe Brady as their new offensive coordinator, his average carries skyrocketed. 16.7 carries after Joe Brady became their offensive coordinator. And that really, really intrigues me because the Buffalo Bills are very similar to the Dallas Cowboys in that they're over-reliant on Josh Allen sometimes, and they just need some weight to be lifted off his shoulders, especially come playoff time when he's a little bit fatigued. So opening up the playbook to incorporate more passes, to get James Cook more involved, to really grind down opposing defenses, will open up the playbook a lot more. And Joe Brady especially is a very, very important part of this offense because he's a passing game coordinator before, and someone who developed a lot of young QBs before. And so just him alleviating the pressure surrounding Josh Allen really makes me hopeful what the Bills can do. But the last team I want to talk about is kind of no surprise, but for a very unexpected reason. It's the Los Angeles Rams. I really believe that Kyren Williams going forward is the running back that will strike fear into opposing players' hearts for the Los Angeles Rams. He averaged 21.3 points per game in 12 games he played, 20 or more points 7 times. He averaged 19 carries per game. So Kyren Williams is a bell cow, especially in that Rams system that always generates motion and jet sweeps and tries to vary where certain players go in the system. So I'm really looking forward to Kyren Williams in his second year, fully getting integrated into that Los Angeles system, truly making it spark. And what I really like about the Los Angeles Rams is that they're taking into consideration who could be the future QB of this team, because Matthew Stafford is not going to be there forever. And I feel like should they just transition to a guy who's more timing based, Kyren Williams is going to get a lot more touches. And so Los Angeles Rams are definitely a team who you might consider in terms of not just fantasy rushing success, but success all around. That will just about do it for this segment. I really liked it dissecting these teams in a market that's going to be very pivotal in years to come. But coming next, we have our own player profile of the day on the defensive side of the ball for all IDP League players. In terms of Joey Bosa, will he even more establish himself as the dominant player in football? We'll have to see. Coming up on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news shows. Available everywhere podcasts are found.
Leagues and on the defensive side of the ball, we're going to be looking at one of those players who really has outperformed the overall outlook of his defense, and with a new system implemented could be even more dominant and potentially go number one in some IDP draft leagues, in my humble opinion. So without further ado, let's jump right into the fantasy player profile of Joey Bosa. And like I said, the Chargers defense has not really had the chance to fully get the best out of each and every player involved. However, that's not the case for Joey Bosa. He has always been a menacing presence, a dominant force at the linebacker position for many years for this Chargers defense. However, under Brandon Staley, no pun intended, they grew stale as a defense. So what do? They bring in Jim Harbaugh, an addition I really love on the defensive side of the ball because he really brings out the best in his defensive players by simplifying the system. Without further ado, let's jump right into why Joey Bosa is going to have an explosive year as a linebacker. 1,421 fantasy points, 742.1 fantasy points, throughout his career. His best season was in 2017, where he accrued 143.9 fantasy points. Last year, fantastic season. 14 solo tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, and 1 pass defended. Next year, he's going to up his production a little bit. 24 tackles, 8 sacks for a total of 104.9 fantasy points. And so, what I really love about Joey Bosa, and a reason why I think that next year will be his best, is because he's just so versatile and willing to adapt to different styles of play. The Chargers have a 3-4 front where they definitely rely on their D linemen to open up spaces for guys like Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack to get the leverage, because that's where a lot of their pass rushing prowess comes from. When I look at the Chargers front seven, I'm more impressed by who they have at the linebacker position in their secondary than any other defense, because Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are a special duo. Now, Joey Bosa's the weak side linebacker, meaning that he's more of the athletic kind of player. He can either drop into coverage, stop the run, go sideline to sideline, but can occasionally blitz. And Khalil Mack's more of the dirtier, physical, gritty player. And so, it's a fantastic duopoly to have, especially considering the fact that the Chargers predicate themselves on their pressures and stunts that they create for those two. But the caveat had always been, is Brandon Staley truly holding them back? And I think the answer was undoubtedly, resoundingly yes, because you have these two players who can take over games defensively, no matter what your offense is doing. These two players alone can create impactful plays that really help you in the long run in certain games. And Brandon Staley didn't really realize that. And so why I'm so hyped about what Jim Harbaugh brings to the Chargers, especially defensively, is just that he's going to allow them to relax a little bit. Brandon Staley, for some reason or other, felt a little bit tense in certain moments, and he never truly grasped what this defense could translate to in any given situation, in big game situations. And so he kind of lost sight of what they needed. They needed a more hands-off approach. They needed to understand their roles, especially that front seven. And bringing in Jim Harbaugh, who had so much success in Michigan, as we saw with Aiden Hutchinson, guys like David Ojabo, even in the back end with guys like Will Johnson. He created a culture that allowed each player to play freely. And looking at Joey Bosa, it certainly feels like he hasn't been restricted. He's certainly been the central force of this Chargers defense in the Brandon Staley era. But now really spells a pivotal time for Joey Bosa in this Chargers defense, because if they don't get it right year one in the Jim Harbaugh era, if they don't show any signs of progress, then I really think it's their problem. It's not a coaching problem. I think it's definitely more of how this front seven plays in terms of stylistically, in terms of allowing their best players the freedom and ability to play off the ball. And that's what I love about Joey Bosa. He's definitely an off-ball kind of guy. When he sniffs danger, he goes for it. But he certainly is someone who is willing to do the more athletic side of the position and allow Khalil Mack to get forward. That certainly adds that element of surprise to what he does. And I think Jim Harbaugh is going to acknowledge that and say, hey, Joey, you're a more athletic, skilled guy in the linebacker core. You can be used in so many different ways, and that's what I love about him. He's not just a guy who's going to get you the sacks. He's not going to get you just tackles for loss. I think this year specifically, I'm looking for Joey Bosa to even force fumbles, get a couple picks. I think that this year is going to be the year of Joey Bosa in the Chargers system. Now, the only caveat I have for this Chargers defense stems from the front three. In a 3-4 defense, especially if your best players in your front seven are your linebackers, your front three have to be tasked with opening up the spaces to allow for these different linebackers to rush the passer and get their job done. If that doesn't happen, then quarterbacks will have more time to press the field, and thus this defense will stagnate yet again. And so, looking at the Chargers front three, I definitely don't see someone who immediately stands out. Poona Ford definitely is a big presence, kind of more of as a nose tackle player who can eat up blockers just due to his sheer size. I've seen it at Seattle. But he doesn't necessarily add any dimension outside of just size that can really impact how guards and tackles block these players. And so that's what I'm concerned about. Can Joey Bosa be given these opportunities by his D linemen to create negative plays for the offense, while also focusing on dropping into coverage and helping them out there? Because I really think that Joey Bosa's season is this season. But it's all predicated on how these front three players can get to the quarterback themselves. Because you need to create depth. You need to force the offensive line back in order for the linebackers to come forward and be confident in getting positive plays out of what they do. Because if not, then Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are running moot points. And when I think about Jim Harbaugh diagnosing his best players in terms of the University of Michigan and how it translates to the Chargers, he's going to need to find a way to say to his D lineman, hey, we got to let our linebackers eat. We have to find opportunities for you guys to just open up, let them be them. Because it's all fine and dandy to continue running this 3-4 system, because I think it's a system that works for them, because it allows a lot of freedom in the linebacker position. But for now, I need to see a huge improvement from this front three. Because Joey Bosa can create himself, but he doesn't always need to. And that's why I believe that Joey Bosa is on the precipice of having a great year, but I'm not fully buying it. In terms of fantasy, he's going to be someone who you highly covet. But is he someone who might be held back by the deficiencies of the players in front of him? It's no longer about Brandon Staley's negativity. It's about the all-in collective. And that's all I have to say about that. Hope you guys enjoyed this segment. I really did. I love Joey Bosa as a defensive prospect. Coming next, a very special segment for all you baseball fans out there. To commemorate the All-Star festivities, we're going to be looking over the betting favorites to win the Home Run Derby taking place tonight at Globe Life Field in Arlington, Texas. We'll be right back to look at those candidates. Hello everyone and welcome back yet again to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Fantasy Sports Network. Hope you guys have enjoyed the show thus far. But if you're a baseball fan, now is your time to rejoice. Very rarely do we feature baseball on this show, but we have a special occasion for tonight. We have the Home Run Derby to commemorate the All-Star festivities, everyone's favorite event, or one of their favorite events. So tonight, in memory and commemoration of this event, let us go into this segment with open minds as we discuss the betting favorites for the Home Run Derby. Now this field seems to be very open, only 8 players in it, a lot of talent, a lot of intrigue. Without further ado, let's jump right into it, starting off with the 8th best favorite, Alec Bohm, plus 1,600. He just doesn't seem like someone who can sustain playing this Home Run Derby game where fatigue will certainly set in over rounds, because while he hits the ball hard, gets good contact, 37.8% hard contact rate this year, Alec Bohm does not strike me as a home run threat. It hasn't really translated to the amount of home runs he's hit either. Lowest number of home runs in this field with 11. So Alec Bohm definitely is an outsider. I don't necessarily know too much about this field outside of the top 2 guys, but Alec Bohm on a Philadelphia Phillies team that definitely has better home run hitters doesn't strike me immediately as a candidate for a home run derby, and that's why he's seen as one of those players much lower in terms of the odds. So Alec Boehm, make of him what you will, but I definitely would not bet on him tonight because of his long odds. Coming in with plus 1,200 odds, someone who has hit a large number of home runs, but still kind of has that disconnection in terms of power over contact, is Jose Ramirez. Sorry, not Teoscar Hernandez just yet. 23 home runs this year, plus 1,200 odds. He has a very low bat speed, though. And looking at someone like Jose Ramirez, who's getting up there in age, I really kind of think of him more as a contact hitter. Yes, he still has power, as we see with his home run total, but with a slower bat speed, kind of a slower swing, it will take a lot for him to get going. Take a lot for him to kind of like settle into these different rounds. And so I'm really, really kind of intrigued to see if Jose Ramirez is going to play the long game, kind of get himself going, hype himself up in order to sustain his play, because as a bigger guy, we saw that Vlad Guerrero Jr. kind of got over that hump a little bit, but a guy like Jose Ramirez, up there in age, doesn't really appeal to me as a long shot either. But the guy coming in number 6 in terms of betting odds at plus 1,000, who I really think could be a potential dark horse here, is someone in Teoscar Hernandez, who I don't necessarily view as a power hitter either, or someone who can string together a series of home runs, but it's just someone who really intrigues me in this kind of quote-unquote tournament format to hit a lot of home runs. And so, looking at his 19 home runs, it's a solid total. 14.9% bat-to-barrel rate. That's a solid number. In terms of strikeouts, though, he has the 9th most in the league with 106. But tonight, in this event, I really think that to get himself going, he's going to have a game plan. You know, you can't take as many swings and misses in this kind of style of play. You're going to want to get off as many home runs, but might favor him a little bit if he can get it to a swing off where you have 2 minutes to hit as many home runs as possible. I could see him advancing a lot. So at plus 1,000 tonight, if you are betting on this event, I think that Teoscar Hernandez is a nice little dark horse for you guys, especially considering that the top 2 in this field might be slugging it out early and often. That could fatigue them a little bit, but I think that Teoscar Hernandez should not be overestimated in terms of this tournament. And I think that he will be my dark horse in this home run derby. But coming in, the 5th best odds is Bobby Witt Jr., the young shortstop out of the Kansas City Royals. I just think that Bobby Witt at plus 600, I see him as a more poppy player, you know. He's a much more contact-oriented guy. I really think, yes, while he's an exciting young star translating into the league, his 15 home runs, 91st in terms of hard hit percentage, with an average exit velocity of 92.1. I think that the reason I'm picking him is because in this format, you're not necessarily looking to just get contact. You're looking to really find a rhythm. And Bobby Witt doesn't seem like a rhythm kind of player. He's going to have moments where he's just going to be hitting long fly balls or short grounders into the open field, and that's going to really hinder him. I think that he is not in a matchup that's matching up with him well. I think he's matched up with Teoscar Hernandez in the first round. And so, as someone who is younger, it's a good profile, it's a good look for the MLB to bring someone like Bobby Witt Jr. in to make this more fun. I just think that at plus 600, he's not the safest bet. But coming in, this is the young gun who I kind of like in terms of being a favorite in the home run derby. Gunnar Henderson at plus 550, 27 home runs, the most in this field. Home run to fly ball ratio is 32.1%. So I really believe that Gunnar Henderson, his game has translated to the MLB well. The second young star for the Baltimore Orioles after Adley Rutschman last year to make it, and I just really like Gunnar Henderson, man. I think that the Baltimore Orioles young stars have a lot of power and content, and they're really learning to balance it well. And I really like Gunnar Henderson. I think he can make a run here. I don't think he'll win ultimately because he hasn't had experience in the home run derby, but I really do like him. Let's move along a little bit more quickly now. Get to the top contenders. Number 3, Marcell Ozuna. A lot of people forget about him from the Braves. Plus 425, 23 home runs, second in NL behind Shohei Ohtani. He does have a very high swinging strike percentage, but he does have power. We don't want to forget about him. He's very sneaky amidst this field, kind of going under the radar on this Twins team, on this Braves team, rather. And I really like him, but he's not being this sloppily. Coming in at number 2, one of my favorite players in the entire MLB, because he's my favorite team in the entire MLB. My boy Adolis Garcia, playing in his home stadium. The crowd's going to be behind him. Obviously, a guy that's strong and powerful might tire a lot quicker. We saw last year with his performance where he kind of disappointed in the first round. But Adolis Garcia, it's not been his best year in terms of home runs. 17 home runs. He does have a fantastic exit velocity. He can really rip the baseball. In a hometown crowd, you never know, at plus 350. Second shortest odds, rather. I really think in his hometown stadium, he can make an impact. But, coming in at number 1, perhaps the undisputed home run king. The king of the home run derby. The guy you don't want to face. The guy who cherishes the home run derby more than anyone I've ever seen. Pete Alonso. Pistol Pete, Polar Bear Pete Alonso. You're not stopping this guy at plus 300. The 2-time champ, looking to become only the second 3-time champ behind Ken Griffey Jr. And man, I just love watching Pete Alonso win these things. He's always in the zone. Only 18 home runs in 87 games this year, not his best year. When he gets into the home run derby, he just exudes this kind of calm and composure. He's bopping his head. He doesn't care what the crowd thinks of him. He's like the monster of this thing. And I think that Pete Alonso is the safest bet and best option at that value to win the home run derby. So anyone betting, happy All-Star break. Happy home run derby day. Thank you guys for tuning into today's show. We'll be back better than ever tomorrow. Like, follow, and subscribe to me and my fellow podcasters on the network. Leave a tip or donation at the link gsmc.cloud. Thank you guys for tuning in.